Well, my name is Mike. I am the high school pastor, and I am also one of the teaching pastors here at CFC. And as a high school pastor, I get the chance to go to camp. And you know, I've been here for 8 years now, and so it's pretty funny going to camp now versus when I started going to camp here. I was 23, and I'm not 23 anymore. And so it's pretty funny to see the difference in my experience of camp, and maybe most poignantly, my recovery after camp has shifted over the years. But I'm always amazed at camp because it is this incredible opportunity to speak into some of the most difficult parts of students' lives and their stories. And what really strikes me as I've been doing youth ministry here for a while is that the things that these 11-year-olds and 14-year-olds and 17-year-olds are navigating, I'm dumbfounded by the difficulty of the things that they have to navigate. There's some serious stuff that our students are wrestling with, dealing with at an identity level and at a circumstantial level in terms of the things going on around them. This is surprising to me, or not surprising, but dumbfounding to me, because that just isn't my story, that I experienced such difficult things in middle and high school. That's just not my story. The hardest thing that I went through in high school is that I didn't make varsity basketball as a sophomore. No. Are you okay, Mike? Yes, I've recovered, right? And so for me to hear the things that these students are going through, man, it's dumbfounding to me. It really is dumbfounding. No, in my story, in my context, God has decided that he was going to allow me to kind of breeze through my childhood and adolescent years, and then like right in the year 2023, just let a bunch of difficult stuff happen. All in 1 year, just pile it right in there. And that's the way that God's decided to work in my story. And so if you remember if you've been with us here at CFC for about a while, you'll remember that about this time last year, I was on stage and I shared about what was top of mind for me at the time in terms of being stretched and being made uncomfortable in my walk with Jesus. And at the time, about late fall 2022, at the time, what that was our house was becoming the spot in the neighborhood for all the neighbor kids to come in. And we were the safe space, and that was kind of new, and we were learning how to navigate that. And I was sharing that was stretching for me because kids are loud and they eat so much food. And so to be the safe space in the neighborhood, what a blessing, what a beautiful thing. But it was top of mind for me, and this is the difficult thing that I'm going through right now. But then fast forward a few months, and if you were here around Super Bowl Sunday time, somewhere in that period, I was on stage again, and I shared that there were 2 homeless young adults that we wanted to house at CFC, and our church stepped up in a huge way, and we were able to really address those needs as best as we possibly could. It was really, really cool. Monumental strain and effort on me and my spouse and on the people of CFC who stepped into those situations. Crazy amount of effort, emotional strain, heartache, difficulty, logistical challenges, energy. It was extremely difficult. And it sounds really good. But as you know, the X's and O's of doing something good are usually pretty difficult. So that's February 2023. That was pretty difficult. But then the last time that I was up on stage, we talked about Rahab, which many of the kids still remember. But in the introduction of that, I believe I recall sharing that my family had been through a bit of a string of bad luck prior to that. That in about a 3-week period leading up to that message, we had suddenly and without warning had to purchase a new minivan. Y'all know minivans are expensive, right? Okay, I'm a youth pastor, okay? I'm not a CEO. Minivans are expensive. And then, like a week or 2 later, our kitchen table broke. That's like a thing you purchase every 10 years. It's like basically a car in terms of how, and it happened right after another 10-year purchase that we had to make. So it was a string of bad luck, and we were navigating that, and I was sharing how that was difficult for me and my family, just financially, right? Just the stress of that. But then, literally like like 5 days after I preached that message. There was a clogged pipe in our kitchen sink, and that clogged pipes led to a flood and so our drywall, our flooring, and our cabinetry in our kitchen, toast, flooded, ruined, right? And as insurance has gotten contractors involved and they've been working on that stuff, mistake after mistake after mistake has been made to the point where this I know that I tend to be funny on it. This is not a joke. That nightmare of a situation has escalated to a point that has been genuinely devastating for my family. And so it's so funny to me to think back to this time last year when I was worried about a couple extra pizzas in the oven. Because where I am now is a totally different level of discomfort and pain and difficulty than where I was a year ago this time. And here's the thing. Insurance can provide a hotel for my family to stay at. And insurance can provide us with rental cars to use. And insurance can reimburse us for all of the new stuff that we've had to buy over the past week and a half. But this situation has not just been an attack on my stuff. What my family and I have gone through over the past couple of weeks has been an attack on my heart. And there is nothing that Liberty Mutual can do to protect or to heal my heart. For some of us, something greater we need to build is our hearts. For some of us, the something greater we need to build is our hearts, because I know I'm not the only one who's going through something right now. It's unfortunate, it's frustrating, but it feels like none of us really get to build in peace for very long, do we? Because the attack, the onslaught, it always seems to be coming. And when it does, I don't know if you've realized this yet, but when it does, it doesn't just come for your circumstances, it's coming after your heart. And this is why for some of us, we have these things that our heart just keeps getting drawn back to, these statements, these core beliefs, these destructive core beliefs that our heart comes back to in the midst of difficulty. Like when someone cuts you off in traffic, it reinforces the destructive core belief that you're worthless. When a friend doesn't call you back, they're not there for you when they should be, it reinforces the destructive core belief that you're worthless. When your boss at work doesn't acknowledge you for the things that you do, it reinforces the destructive core. It's like there's this thing that no matter what you're going through, your heart just seems to come back to it. And it's constantly reinforced by the difficulties and the traumas that we go through in life. And here's the thing. For some of us, we haven't even noticed the pattern. For some of us, we haven't realized that but just like the Jews that we've been talking about, they had generationally been vulnerable to physical attack because they didn't have the wall of Jerusalem. Some of us have been, we are generationally, or maybe we'll lower the stakes, just recurringly vulnerable to emotional and mental and spiritual attack. The same thing inside of us keeps getting attacked over and over and over again, and some of us haven't spotted the pattern yet. We haven't realized that there's a thread here, there's a common denominator that keeps recurring over and over again. For some of us, we just think that, I'm just the victim of a hard life. And listen, for some of you, that's true. You are the victim of a hard life. If you were to tell me your story, I would. But here's the thing. For most of us in the room, for most of us watching online, it's true that you are the victim of a hard life, but it is not uniquely true. Your life is difficult, but it is not uniquely difficult. We all get punched in the gut. The thing is, because your heart, because you have not addressed the vulnerabilities, the generational or just recurring vulnerabilities in your heart, you're suffering way more than you actually have to. Because there's this thing in our heart that everything keeps coming back to, and we just leave it there, open and vulnerable. And we hope that nothing happens ever again that's going to trigger us, but something always happens, doesn't it? Because whether it's getting cut off in traffic or it's the loss of a loved one, everything seems to come back to these destructive core beliefs that we hold. And so because we don't get to build in peace for very long, because it seems as though the onslaught is coming, my hope in what we talk about today is that while we all want to build something greater out there, my hope is that what we talk about today is going to help us begin or continue to build something greater in here. So whether you're going through something right now, that's me, you've been through something before, or you're in the in-between rounds just waiting. You know it's coming. My hope is that what we talk about today is going to prepare and help you begin to heal your heart so that we can accomplish something greater out there, because we've started the work of doing something greater in here. So if you have a Bible, we are headed to Nehemiah chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4, and if you have not been with us over the course of this series, we've been talking about Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a Jew. He had been living large in another land, far off land. He'd been living large and living the high life until God called him to go back to his homeland of Jerusalem and lead the effort of building a physical wall to kind of protect and restore honor to Nehemiah's people. And so while this story is on the surface just about a construction project, what we've been talking about over the past few weeks in this For Something Greater series is that there's a whole lot more going on here than just a construction project, because we all have things that we're trying to build. We all have stuff that we want to build that's for something greater, something bigger than ourselves. And we've been talking about what it would look like as a church community to come together so that we are better together for the building of something greater. And what happens in Nehemiah chapter 4 is going to be extraordinarily helpful for you and me if the something greater we want to build is our heart. Because what we discover in Nehemiah chapter 4 is that nobody gets to build in peace for long. The enemy always is on the brink of attack. And so we are in Nehemiah 4, starting in verse 1. And we come back to this guy we talked about a couple of weeks ago in verse 1. Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Sumerian army officers, "What does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing?" Now listen, in the context of what was actually going on, right, this was Sanballat and a couple of his army officers. These are just dudes blowing off steam, talking some smack about their enemies, right, the Jews. But somehow, this smack talk makes its way to the Jewish camp. I don't know exactly how that happened, but it made its way to the Jewish camp. And so, and here's the interesting thing. If you know the story of the history of the Jewish people, when Sanballat calls them feeble and poor, them words could possibly hit hard if you're a Jew and you hear that that's what people are calling you out there. That could bring you back to some destructive core beliefs, because if you paid attention to the history, the historical context of what's been going on here, you'll know that the Jewish people were considered less than. They were considered weak, and they had been for quite some time. And so you know how lies, there's always just a little bit of truth in it, that it's twisted, right? This attack by Sanballat and by his boys, this could have easily struck a destructive core belief for the Jews who were present and who heard that this is what other people are saying about us. Easily. So I think you and I can resonate with this. Of course they felt the sting of Sanballat's words. Of course they did. In fact, there might have been some Jews who heard this and then felt that hey, he's right, I am weak. He's right, I am less than. No, he's right, he's right. That's heart level stuff, that's identity stuff, that before Sanballat ever waged any kind of physical attack on the work of the Jewish people, he first went after their heart. He first went after their sense of identity, that this is what the enemy does today. That so many of us, we mistake the difficult things we go through, oh, that's Satan. That's the difficult thing is Satan. Maybe, sometimes, maybe not, right? Like, I don't know, there's biblical, you could argue biblically for that sometimes Satan causes difficulties. You got the story of Job and all that kind of stuff, right? Sure, Satan gets in there and he wreaks havoc, but I would suggest to you that sometimes, maybe more often than we'd care to admit, the where Satan is working, it's not the difficult thing that happens to you, it's what happens in you. Out of the overflow of the difficult thing. He's coming after your heart. He's coming after your sense of identity, and he does the same thing with Nehemiah and the Jewish people trying to rebuild the wall. And this is important for us to pay attention to. If we got this, if we understood this scheme of the enemy, I think a lot of us, our hearts would be in a much better place, even as life continues to be difficult. But it's not just the identity. It's not just the identity that Sanballat and his boys go after. They also go after some fears, some core fears that they know are probably in there for the Jewish people, because Sanballat's boy Tobiah comes in verse 3, and here's what he says in verse 3. Tobiah the Ammonite, who was standing beside Sanballat, remarked, man, that stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked on the top of it. Y'all know foxes aren't big, right? And so in this, by the way, if you're a Jewish person, if you're one of the Jewish people rebuilding this wall, isn't this your core fear? Isn't this the fear that you have deep down, that all of your work is going to be for nothing? That it's not going to matter in the end, that you're going to put all this time and sweat equity and effort into rebuilding this wall to rebuild the honor of your people, and in the end, it's all going to crumble, and it's going to crumble easily. Of course, this is the heart level fear of the Jewish people. Of course, this is in there for them. You know how I know it's in there for them? Because I know it's in there for you right now with the stuff you're trying to build in your own life. I know it's there for me right now in the stuff I'm trying to build in my own life. Quick poll. Did you guys know I published a book this summer? Yeah, some of us, like 3 people are like, I knew that. You know why no one knows that? Because I haven't really put any effort, allowed me to really put a lot of effort into like getting it out there and into the hands of people, because my life has just been crisis after crisis after crisis for months. And so deep down, there's this fear. There's this fear deep down in there that everything that I'm trying to build is going to crumble, and crumble easily. And I know that you have your own version of that. I know you do, because you have stuff you're trying to build. We all have our versions of that. And this is why I'm so glad that Nehemiah recorded his response to Sanballat's words and their attack. This is where we head to the next verse. Verse 4. Here's how Nehemiah responds. Then I prayed, hear us, our God, for we are being mocked. And he says more in the prayer, but I don't care about anything else that he says in the prayer. Because if he had stopped right there, it would have been enough. It would have been enough if he had stopped right there. His response is basically to go to the Lord and to say, God, we need you to hear us, and we need you to come close, because we are being mocked by the enemy. And the fact that Nehemiah uses the word mocked tells you everything you need to know about where Nehemiah's heart was in preparation for this moment. Because he didn't feel exposed. You feel me? Nehemiah didn't feel exposed by Sanballat's words. He felt mocked. And that's not the same thing. A few days ago, my family, me and my kids, we were in the hotel suite, and they're getting ready for bed. And the kids, and they're getting ready for bed. It's been a long day. It's been a really long day. This has been an extraordinarily difficult period for my family. And so it had been a long day. And my 5-year-old comes into the room. They're supposed to be getting in PJs. I guess she had gotten in PJs, and she comes into my room in the suite in the hotel, and she says, Dad, Lily's copying me. And I looked at her and I said, I don't care. And then she walked away. And that wasn't the way I should have handled that situation. But the reason that I handled that way, right? I thought about it afterward, like, man, that was kind of dismissive. The reason that I handled that way is because kind of inherently, instinctually, like in the midst of everything that we're going through as a family right now, mocking doesn't register. The fact that Lily's mocking her sister, that doesn't register on the scale of things that I'm thinking about right now. It's mocking isn't, and it's because, and we've talked to our kids about this before, we've talked to them about it before, but they're children, right? And so we've talked about this before. When someone mocks you, that doesn't reflect poorly on you. That reflects poorly on them. Mocking is almost inherently rooted in lies and immaturity. And so so mocking shouldn't register. It shouldn't shake us at our identity when someone is mocking us. All adults know that. Kids don't, which is why I should have handled that differently. But almost all adults know that. We inherently get that. So it should be significant to us that when Nehemiah prayed to God in the aftermath of the verbal assault, his prayer was, God, come close, because the enemy's out here being childish again. That's significant. That's a huge, that tells us everything we need to know about where Nehemiah's heart was. And this is on the screen. I want to just read it because I want to make sure that we go ahead and put it up there. Go ahead and put it up. Yeah. Oh, no. It's a sentence. It's like, even before, there it is. All right. Before the attack ever came, Nehemiah's sense of identity was already established not in his worst moments or his people's reputation, but in who God said he was. And if this was our story, the way that was Nehemiah's story, then when the enemy sneaks in and tries to attack our sense of identity or our core fears in the midst of the difficult things that we are going through, we would be able, just like Nehemiah, to simply respond by saying, God, come close, because the enemy's out here being childish again. And this is what I want for us as God's people, and this is what God has called us to as his people. Because here's the thing, if Nehemiah, I want to bring us back into the context of the story, if Nehemiah had crumbled in the aftermath of this verbal assault, if he had let that get to the identity level and root itself in his destructive core beliefs about his identity as a Jew and the worst moments of him and his people, and if he had let that get there, then the wall of Jerusalem would have never been built. If he had let that get there, then him and the Jewish people would have never been better together for something greater. But before the moment of attack ever came, Nehemiah had already rooted his sense of identity in who God said that he was. And it made all the difference in protecting his heart when the attack came. And for some of us, it's not that our heart needs to be protected. I mean, it does. But for some of us, our heart needs to be healed. Protected, the attack's already come and we already fallen victim to it. But now our heart needs to heal. And I just want you to know that the process is the same. That if we would allow our sense of identity and who we are to be told to us and to be established by who God says we are in the context of the gospel, it would make all of the difference. It would allow our hearts to begin to heal. It would allow us to stop being triggered by everyone's. Listen, I was thinking about this morning. It is not everyone's job around you to constantly tiptoe around you to avoid your triggers. That's not everyone's job. Now listen, as Christians, we ought to be kind. We ought to be considerate of other people's story. We ought to really take their story into account and be kind and compassionate and gracious toward people so that we're not unnecessarily causing them pain. But on the flip side of that, if you are the person who is triggered by everything, protect and heal your heart. This is what the gospel is for. So don't make everybody else around you tiptoe around you for forever. No, begin the process of healing in the context of the gospel. This is what we've been called to as Christians. And this is what Nehemiah modeled for us when Sanballat and Tobiah came after his sense of identity. But here's the thing. Throughout this series, we've not just been talking about individually building something greater. And today we've been talking a lot about how you need to individually build something greater, and that something greater is your heart. No, we've been talking about the fact that we are better together for building something greater, that we're better together, that as a church community, we would be better off if we were partnering together, if we were holding hands, we were together as a community, building something for something greater. And so while we've been talking a lot about individualistic stuff, I do think that Nehemiah 4 has something for us when we talk about being better together. And so before we close, I want to address that because I think it's found here in the later verses of Nehemiah chapter 4. Here's what happens in verse 19, because eventually Sanballat and Tobiah, they up the ante, and they're not just going after identity and heart level stuff. They start seriously planning for a physical attack on the people who are building the wall of Jerusalem. And as a good leader, Nehemiah begins the work of prepping his people building around the wall. He begins prepping them for this inevitable physical attack on them as they try to build this wall. And so here's what happens in verse 19. Then I explained to the nobles and officials and all the people, the work is very spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. So when you hear the blast of the trumpet, rush to wherever it's sounding, and then our God will fight for us. And this just sounds like solid military strategy, doesn't it? Like, this is just, we're all spread out. So like when you hear the trumpet, like go to where the sound is so we can fight. Like, it'd be great, right? And then it's just sound military strategy. But I think that there's something for us is when we talk about Christian community. Because the tricky part about being part of a Christian community, a church community, is that, yes, we're all part of one church and we're all building something together, but at the same time, we're all building something individually, right? We all have our stuff that we're going through. We all have the attacks that we're trying to fend off individually in our own story. And this is what makes things, and that's what we said at the top of this message, right? Your life is difficult, but it's probably not uniquely difficult, that we all get punched in the gut. And the question is, what happens afterward? And so because we are all fighting together, we're all working together, but we're all working separately, I think it could easily be said of us what Nehemiah says to his military team, or to his people building the wall, which is that the work for us, CFC, is very spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. This is true of them, and it's true of us as well. And what I love is that Nehemiah doesn't say, well, the solution is we've got to all just work on the same thing and bunch up together and form, some kind of Voltron cult commune together. This is not the solution. That's not the point, right? The point is not that we have to all be constantly together, operate. No, that's not the point. No. You've got your own individual life and story that you're trying to build and the things you're trying to work on. And also, we are working together to build something for something greater. But the solution for Nehemiah is that when the trumpet sounds, when something's going down in the area of the wall where somebody else in your community is, when something's going down, rush to that part of the wall. Rush there. When someone in your serving team experiences a loss, rush there. When someone in your rooted group goes through something that is difficult for their mental health, rush to that spot. When someone in your small group receives catastrophic news, rush to that area. But then, when we get there, when someone in your community here at church, they're going through something, you rush there. My favorite part is that the solution, the answer is not we rush there and then we fight together. We rush there, and then our God will fight for us. Amen. And this is the difference between good friends and authentic Christian community. It is good to have good friends. It is good to have people that will rush to you when you're going through something, and vice versa. But the difference is that as Christians, we don't simply rush and then fight for each other. We do that, but we rush and then we invite the Spirit of the living God in to fight for us. And the reason this matters is because you cannot heal your own heart, and your community cannot heal your heart. It doesn't work that way. You need the Spirit of the living God to come in and to heal and protect and restore what has been stolen from you. And so when the heart level attacks hit you and your Christian community rushes to you, when you invite God's Spirit in, that is where we experience transformation. That is where good friends become places where we have transformational relationships. That's where we experience community. Guys, I don't know if I'm totally okay yet. I really don't. This has probably been, I would say for me, this has easily been the hardest year of my life. And there's stuff that's happened that I didn't mention today. Of course, there's stuff that's happened I didn't mention here today. And all year, my prayer to God has been very simple. My prayer to God has been, God, would you give me a break? Would you give me and my family a break? Would you cut us just a little bit of slack, just for maybe like a year? Just give us some time to recover. And yet it's November. And this is where me and my family are. So I've got some heart level stuff that me and God are working through right now. Me and God are having some tough heart level conversations about the way that He's choosing to answer prayer right now. But even as I go through the difficult thing, externally, circumstantially, I can feel the enemy whispering, trying to get into my heart and whisper things to me that he knows feels true to me, even though it's not true. And so my prayer for me is my prayer for you. And I hope that you have or can develop a people around you here at CFC who this can be your prayer for them and can be their prayer for you when the time comes, because none of us gets to build in peace for very long. So when it all hits the fan and you feel the heart level attacks coming your way, my prayer for me and my prayer for you is very simple. God, come close, because the enemy is being childish again.